I'm standing at the corner of Kitchener and Templeton. This is the 2100 block of Kitchener. And on the corner here is where John Pavich grew up.
I used to climb a larger tree than that, chestnut tree, but they took it down years ago when trees weren't allowed to grow.
So your memories are from the 1950s of living...
Late 50s, early 60s, yeah. We
living
lived here
across
until
the street?
69.
Yeah.
From 1950 to 1969.
Across the street from Lord Nelson's school.
And there used to be a grocery store right here.
Right here where the playground is.
Yeah, right here. And you get ice cream, 2 scoops for a nickel and 4 for a dime. Oh, God. And the Cucciones used to live up here.
That house right there?
Yeah, Michael Cuccione and Mimo Cuccione. He had a son that became quite famous. He was on Baywatch for a couple of shows and did a record, I think, with the Backstreet Boys. He died of cancer. David Hasselhoff came and talked at his funeral. But yeah, so there was a big thing about ping pong bats in those days, and they were just basically a bat like this, and it was only like 5 inches by about 11.5 inches wide.
Bolo bat?
Bolo bat, or you can call them, there's another name for them, what's the other, anyway. So they call them bolo bats, and the grocery store here I think even sold them. And then all these kids were told by this one guy in his probably mid to late teens that they're having a contest and you can win these badges and all that. So you hit the ball up in the air for 25 times, you get a little badge, and that seemed like not much of a prize. Then the next week it would be like 50 times, and I think it went up to about 100 and you got this badge. And then he said, well, in a couple weeks time or 3 weeks time you're going to win the golden bolo bat. And I said, that sounds more exciting. I want to win that. So yeah, so I was only about maybe 10 years old then, 10 or 11. And I remember I had Miss Neat as my school teacher. She was a music teacher and nobody liked her, but anyway, she was pretty good at teaching music. But anyway, so I had to be around 10 or 11. So I practiced this bolo bat. We used to have a couple attic bedrooms upstairs, and my mother would say, well, go upstairs and play with that thing. And I'd walk to school all the way down here batting this thing. Night and day I batted this ping pong. It's like a ping pong ball, almost like this. It's a 3-foot elastic with a 1-inch ball at the end, rubber ball. And it would be night and day. This thing, I became one with the bolo bat. So then came day for the contest. It was kind of chilly. I had to wear this coat. It's quite a thick coat, and because I didn't want to get too cold, and I positioned myself in the middle of the block down here. You'll have to go down here and see exactly where I was. It was quite interesting. There must have been a couple hundred kids.
Couple hundred? Oh
well,
my God.
You figure it's about from this right here to the end of the block.
The whole block was full of kids. Wow.
And I thought, well, I want to get in the middle of that block because I want to see people on my right and my left as the things are dropped. So you can see, when you're younger, everything looks a lot bigger. So how many kids, there was a lot of kids from all the way down that block all the way down here.
A city block is quite a mob, a city block long.
I was right here. These are the same size. And I had this big thick coat on, and I could see the strings dropping, and every time somebody's ball would drop, there'd be a group forming around them, and pretty soon it became like me, then there was one group down there, one group down there, and then those 2 elastics fell, and I was the only one left. So I kept hitting that ball, and then the fellow who ran this contest, he was waiting for me to drop too, and I wasn't going to drop. And I started getting hot, so I took my jacket off and I switched hands. And these kids are like, he's switching hands. They couldn't believe it. But I was like a master kung fu at this bat. I just dreamt about winning this crazy bolo bat. So the guy said, okay, that's enough, kid, that's enough. I said, no, I got to keep going. He says, no, you've won. I said, I have, I know. He says, but aren't I supposed to get? He says, well, how many times have you hit? I said, I think about 5,000. He said, that's impossible. He's only been going about 15 minutes. And if you got 2 hits a second, that's about 1,800 hits. And I guess I was so excited in the moment I forgot what I was counting. So he said, I tell you what, the last week was 1,520 or something. We'll make it 1,586 hits. So that's what he did. He
It's
said,
official.
so he put
1,586
hits. So I still got the bat after all these years. The elastic rotted off many times. Basically just like a regular bolo bat, but they painted it gold. And then they said you can come down in a couple weeks at the Orpheum, I think it was, or the Capitol downtown, and you could win a 10-speed or something like that, 10-speed bike, I think it was. That would be a big deal, but nobody wanted to take me down there. My brother didn't want to take me down there, but anyway, I was happy just to get the bat, and I was like a big celebrity in the school for a few weeks. Even the music teacher said, that's pretty impressive. So that was my little day on the
Must have been the first time in your life you actually really excelled at something, eh? So did you move on to hula hoops later on, or?
Oh, we had hula hoops, yeah. I think everybody had a hula hoop. Yeah, hula hoops were a big deal. There used to be kids that used to climb this building here. I couldn't believe it. These 2 kids, they were
like rock climbing?
Yeah, they would climb on and get their feet. Like, this has been painted many times, so at the time they used to wedge themselves on those spaces and climb up right onto the roof. I climbed the roof one time.
Up to the roof. Gee, that's holy moly.
Yeah, I climbed the back of the roof. There was a flagpole in the middle of the yard. It's still there. I had that flagpole going back and forth about 5 or 6 feet on either side. You can still see
You
it.
climbed the flagpole?
Yeah, we climbed that flagpole. I climbed that. I used to be the
big
tree climber in the neighborhood. One big kid finally beat me, but I used to be one of the fastest tree climbers. And I climbed the back of this crazy school here on the drain pipe, and you know the roof is slate. If you get on that, it's really slippery. But yeah, we used to climb these roofs like nothing, and it's like a bunch of monkeys, right?
Did you have a Davy Crockett?
Oh yeah, we had Davy Crockett hats. We had Zorro. That was the first graffiti, I think. They had a chalk on the end of the Zorro thing, and you'd put a Z.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny because every kid wanted to be Zorro. It was like a cape and a mask and all that stuff. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Roy Rogers. And I had a tricycle. I think I named it after Roy Rogers'
A
horse.
tricycle?
Yeah, I think it was Trigger or whatever. I'm not sure, but it was quite funny.
Well, Trigger was Roy Rogers' horse, so
Yeah.
you must have named your tricycle after the horse. Yeah. And what kind of thing would you buy at the corner store right across the street from your house?
Well, ice cream cones were, like I say, two scoops for a nickel and 4 for a dime. You get this double scoop ice cream holder. I don't think I even have those anymore. And you know, grab bags. You get a grab bag for 2 cents.
2 cents.
2 cents, you get a bunch of candies in there. And of course, my friend's grandfather said, well, they used to get that much for a penny when he was a kid, you know, or if we bought something for a nickel, he got that for a penny. So everything goes up in price, right?
Yeah.
But that was a great little store. A loaf of bread was like 14 cents, and half a pound of butter was like 35 cents. My mother used to run a tab there sometimes and pay the guy at the end of the month or week or whatever.
So were there many immigrant kids back then?
Yeah, didn't seem as many, but I guess there was. I mean, you really didn't think about that. You just play with kids, but a lot of mostly English and Scottish kids around here, and then Italians started moving in. And like I say, the Cucciones owned that big house, and there was some Japanese and some Chinese. It was quite a mix, actually. We had Mr. Harrison. He was right across the street from us. He was a TV repairman. And then Mr. Allen, he was an artist, a really awesome artist. And there was a guy who lived over here. He was an electrician. And Mr. Nellis was an electrician. He lived over here. He worked for BC Hydro. So.
I was just remembering that in the 50s, a lot of the jobs were in the resource industries. Like you had logging, and certainly sawmills in False Creek. You had fishing and agriculture. They were all big at the time.
My dad was a fisherman, so.
Really?
Yeah, and soon after we bought the house here, my dad and Mom bought the house for $4,500 back in 1950. And then in the summer of '52, my dad and 6 other men went out in the Daisy Bee and they never came back. And I would have only been about 1.5 years old. And so my mother was a widow at about 28 years old, something like that. 3 of us, my brother and my sister and me. Yeah. That was, but you know, we always had something to eat. I mean, it was nothing fancy. You don't have computers like today and all that stuff, and Wi-Fi and YouTube and all this, but you know, you played outside a lot. Kick the can, all kinds of games outside. Hide and seek. We used to use the whole block for hide and seek. It's unbelievable.
Did you ever find anybody?
Well, I stepped in a bee's nest once in the garage, and man, that was the end of that game for me. I got stung about. The first time I ever got stung was about 6 times in my right leg. I stepped on a board to get up in the attic of the garage because my friend was up there. He said, "Yeah, just step on those boards," and all of a sudden I stepped on a bee's nest, and I beat him running that day. And he was one of the fastest kids in. He said, "You beat me running." I said, "Well, you didn't step in the bee's nest." Because that's why. I think they should use bees in every Olympic running. Get the adrenaline going, man. That was funny.
So what was your first job as a teenager?
First job?
Or working?
Well, the guys who used to come around here, they would ask us if we wanted to sell, you know, like berries and all that door to door. And we would get like, I don't know, 5-10 cents a basket. And we'd go around the whole neighborhood with a tray, and we'd like to buy some raspberries or blueberries or whatever, and they would buy them off us, and we would make a few dollars. It wasn't bad. And there was a guy that would come around with a horse and get pictures of us on this little pony. It was like an arthritic little pony, and he'd come and ask the parents, "You want to buy this picture?" And of course, my mother had pictures of us every year on the pony. They went from black and white to color, with the hat on and the holster and all that. And then
Roy Rogers days, I guess.
Yeah, and then well, the other job I had was a neighbor of ours. He worked in the metal yard, and he would give us radiators to take apart. It's aluminum, and we would take screwdrivers and spend like hours taking one radiator apart and make like, I don't know, $5 or something.
Back in the 50s, people used to go picking things all the time. Do you ever do that?
Picking things like berries and all that. And I picked beans when I was I guess I was about 12 years old or something like that. My aunt lived next door to Mr. Sitter, who was one of the biggest leasers of land in Richmond to grow beans, and mostly low-rise beans.
Those are hard to pick, aren't they? You have to bend over, and it's hot.
The Chinese people were the best at picking them. This one girl, she would pick like a 5-gallon bucket. She'd do 2 rows, I'd be doing 1 row while she's talking to me, and she'd have this thing full. I'm like, and then the owner would come around and say, "Hey, you missed a lot of yellow beans." I'm like, "What?" And she would make $20 a day, and I was lucky to make 10. And some of the families there, they wouldn't even make $20 between the 4 or 5 of them. You know, it's like some of the old grandmothers and that would be there, and they didn't pick much. They just came out there to do something, right? But it was really hot. My aunt, I was living at her house all summer. She was a great cook, so she would cook up all this breakfast for me. Then I would have a big lunch, and she was like leaving me beautiful sandwiches, Boston cream pies, all this stuff. So one day I was told by her that Mr. Sitter wanted me to do something for him that day. So he said, how many beans did you pick this morning? I said, I don't know, about $7 worth or something. He says, "Okay, I'm going to give you $7 or $10. I want you to come with me." And he wanted me to guard all these beans on number 3 road somewhere. And there was like a whole pile of bean bags. There must have been several hundreds of pounds of these, several hundreds of these bags, big sacks full of beans. And so he didn't want anybody to steal them. So I was sitting in there guarding, and I piled them all up like a Second World War bunker. And I'm laying there with my straw hat on, and I can see right over the rise of these beans. And then I must have fallen asleep, and I hear this truck, and I thought, "Oh, he must be here." He gets out of the truck, and he looks around. He starts kicking a few of these bags. I thought, this guy may be thinking of stealing these bags. I said, "Can I help you with something?" And he said, "Oh, no. He says, "I'm just looking for." I said, No. I said, "These aren't those beans. Get out of here." And so he took off.
You were 12 years old, yeah?
I was probably around 12 then, yeah. And so I made enough money to buy some clothes. And I remember buying this one jacket from Murray Goldman. He used to have those ads. "There's not a single sale There's not a single suit. There's not a single suit for sale at Murray Goldman's, and he'd always give you two for the price of one. He needed all these advertising where he'd be flying in the air. He's crazy. Anyway, Murray Goldman, I bought its jacket, and I wore it about twice, and I said, man, I spent $65 on this jacket. I think I made about $150 for the whole summer. And I wore it twice, and I hated it. And I gave it to a friend of mine's brother years later. He just loved it. I thought, well, thank God somebody got a use out of this.
What was wrong with it?
I just didn't like it. It was kind of
so they had a good
girly looking. Like, Arnold would say, girly man.
So a good salesman talked you into it.
Well, I don't think anybody talked me into it. I just thought it was kind of a cool winter jacket at the time. And then I got some kind of weird looks when I wore it at school, and I thought, I'm not wearing this stupid jacket anymore. Back in '69, I went out fishing West Coast to see what it was like to do seining, and that's a tough job. I almost got killed twice out there. Guy let the skiff out in the middle of the morning and blackout, and I'm not even in the skiff. I'm supposed to be the second skiff man. So, yeah, fishing is not a fun thing.
So there's a memorial at Steveston?
Yeah, there's a big needle that they, it's about 8 or 10 feet high, and it's for all the fishermen that passed away. It's out in Steveston there at the park.
How many names on there?
There's 7 names. My dad's Tony Pavich on the Daisy B. Silvo Carr was the owner of the boat. And yeah, my dad had an offer to go on another boat, but he said, I already promised this other guy, Silvo Carr. And so all these women were widows, 7 widows.
But back in the days when it was everything except tourism, I mean, a lot of people got killed on the job. And there were lots of widows around. Again, now with computers, everybody's got a computer. Less so, I suppose, today.
Yeah. Well, my dad also did forestry work. And he was in the coal mining on Cumberland. And he almost got killed coal mining. He got pinned against a boxcar, and the guy said, well, good thing he's got good bone structure, because he might have been crushed if he was a smaller guy.
Cumberland only went for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 decades, and 300 people died mining in Cumberland altogether. 300.
Yeah.
So all those resource industries were very dangerous.
I remember as a kid, my mother was saying, well, that's the last time the milk's going to be delivered by a horse. And I'm like, why? She says, well, next week it's going to be a truck. And he was right there in front of the house on Templeton. And he would stop this horse, and he'd get out and run up to the door and put the milk on the stand, and then get on the horse and go by. I said, wow. I didn't really, as a kid, I thought, oh, it's kind of nice, a horse. And there used to be a junk man. He would go up and down the alleys, and he had a horse. Years after that, and he'd have a whip, and some of the kids, if they got near him, he'd crack the whip. We had a sawdust furnace, and if you wanted to have a bath, you had to chop some kindling and put it in this little pot-bellied stove, and it had these copper pipes inside there, and they would heat up the water, and then they would go and heat up the hot water tank, and the water would come out.
So you had a wood-fired hot water heater that you had to put wood in.
Yeah, it was a metal tank, and then we had a...
And that was down the basement?
Yeah, and then we had the sawdust hopper. Remember one time putting the sawdust in there, and the chair fell out from under me, and I grabbed the hopper, and it broke off its mooring, and my brother was trying to find me under all the sawdust, and ate a few pieces of wood. It was crazy. I thought I was going to be dead. And then my mother was mad because we had to get someone to bolt the thing back on. So sometimes if the sawdust was wet, it would stop, and then you'd have to start the fire up again. And so we had a garage full of sawdust. We had a basement with a room full of, but you had to tar paper the walls, otherwise the sawdust would eat away the wood. And after that, we went to coal and wood, and that would burn a lot longer. And then one day, my mother said, "I'm going to get a gas furnace." Back in the mid to late '60s.